corporate fraud that led to other frauds like WorldCom, Enron, what have you. So that was the era of corporate fraud, and I saw that. I only spent 2 years at DLJ, and then I went up to Boston to a firm called Independence Investments to be a technology analyst. And because of what I saw going on in the halls of DLJ, I knew that it was going to end badly. Steered my firm the best I could as a young analyst through that debacle, and parlayed that into a job at BlackRock as a portfolio manager in 2002. And spent 10 years there raising assets. We started off with $2 billion through performance and asset gathering. We grew it, so we had a good track record. And we also steered our fund through the great financial crisis, which was another fraud I saw. And in these frauds, there's always a refrain. In the internet fraud, it's a new paradigm, Ed. And you could say that was my first mass formation psychosis. People there were like, it's different, Ed. You got to get on board. And then in the great real estate crisis, home prices never go down, right? And of course, all you had to do was Google home prices falling, and you saw that 50 years before that they had fallen. And then now, the scene that I'm involved in is tracking ones and zeros, dead, not dead, disabled, not disabled. And the refrain I heard for this, I call this a fraud. This is a fraud that involves different silos: media, pharma, government, regulatory capture. So this is the biggest fraud we've ever seen. And the refrain is safe and effective. So every fraud error has a refrain. And this is the most egregious fraud I've ever seen in my life. And so how did I figure out this other fraud? Pattern recognition, following trends. And so I'm just a guy that tries to get ahead of everybody else. That was my job, was to be first. So what we decided to do was look at group life policies specifically, because whole life, as you know from insurance, it's Byzantine accounting. So group life is shorter duration contracts, so we knew losses would show up there immediately, and they did. So that was early days, and the numbers were astounding, because basically the group life folks hadn't priced the policies correctly. And why was that? Because in 2021, there was a mix shift from old to young in terms of excess deaths. 2020 was all about old people dying, and that's okay for insurance companies because a lot of them already paid in. They're not on group life policies anymore because they're retired. Doesn't matter. But something very striking happened in 2021, and that's when we really started, thinking we were 100% right, that the vaccine was doing something. So the big mix shift from old to young was a big tell for us. COVID wasn't killing young people in 2020. What was killing people in 2021? We obviously think it's the vaccines, and the data keeps rolling in. We got all 22 in, and it's not looking good. And since those numbers that you spoke about, the Society of Actuaries has collated all the numbers from the group life industry. They do a survey. 80% of the revenues are covered, and they verified our numbers in August of 2022 with a report that they put out. Table 5.7 is the big table, and it's claims. It's not dollars. It's just claims. And right now, if you were to look at the group life policy results this quarter, they're not that bad because they've priced it up. They've repriced everything, so that the losses aren't occurring because they're just raising prices. But the claims, the number of the units, the deaths, is still up. And what we saw in 2021 was alarming. One of the biggest things that I think is a smoking gun is what happened to the millennials in the third quarter of 2021. In the group life policy holders, their excess mortality prior to that in the spring was running around 30%. You got to remember, 10%, as stated by Scott Davison at One America, is a once in a 200-year flood for this age group, 25 through 44. And he was seeing 40%. 40% is off the charts. But in the third quarter of 2021, in table 5.7, their excess mortality rose up to 84%. 84%. And then it's come down since then, which is good news, but it's still running around 23%. And a whistleblower of mine at an insurance company who has insight to the Society of Actuary numbers just leaked to me, we're reaccelerating this, in the fourth quarter of 2022. So it's not good news. But for me, the spike to 84% was what I call an event. What was that event? Well, it was called mandates and mass vaccination program. This is a group of people that aren't supposed to die, and especially group life policy holders, as you know, Patrick. These folks are the elite. They work at Fortune 500 companies, mid-sized companies, and they have access to the best healthcare. So why would all of a sudden they die in a very temporal spike like that? We're assuming it's the mandates and the vaccines. I've heard the naysayers tell me it's suicides. So there was a suicide pact in the third quarter of 21. Doubtful, yeah. Doubtful, right? Mm-hmm. Was there? And I'm also told, well, drug overdoses. Well, you get a group life claim, you have to be employed with the company. I don't know too many fentanyl and heroin users at Fortune 500 companies to keep their jobs for long. So there wasn't a mass, overdosing situation. And then the third one that I heard was they missed their cancer screening treatment or appointments. I'm 56. I haven't had a cancer screening in my life.
Certainly, did you want to share about the disabilities? I think that's important.
Yeah, the disability data is pretty stark. So since the introduction of the vaccines, disabilities have taken off nationwide. And I'm using U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So prior to COVID, for the prior 5 years, we had about 29 to 30 million disabled Americans just bouncing up and down. Around February of 21, it took off, and it went up and to the right. Concurrent with the vaccine uptake, we do statistical analysis. It's like a 0.9 R squared fit. That's geek speak for there's some correlation there. Now they'll say correlation's not causation, whatever. But since the introduction of the vaccines, we went to a high of 33.2 million disabled folks in September of 22. So again, I told you 29 to 30 million was the average prior 5 years. So we added 3.2 million in about 18 months. When you break down the data of the 3.2, 1.7 million is employed. So the employed are having a tough time. Mm-hmm. Excessive death and disability.
What are the disabilities that are?
It's a 1 and a 0. They don't get into the granular. It's just raw numbers. So I'm saying there's a signal here. I don't need to go any further than that. That's a big number. It's 10% increase overall. It got defunded. His investors almost bailed on him, but they held in, and he made phenomenal killing. So there's a bit of timing to this. But what you look for is my sweet spot's between perception and reality, right? So the herd is perceiving a truth, and the numbers underlying that truth are starting to change.
The herd is perceiving a truth, and the underlying numbers are starting to change.
Correct. And so basically, you try to capture when the perception is going to change to the new reality. And so with this fraud that I saw, from the get-go, it started to seem strange. Before the vaccine was introduced in 2020, I saw people being suppressed, censorship. And I'm one of those. I'm an information junkie. So when someone tells me not to look at something, it's like a moth to a flame. I'm going to go look.
You're looking through, and I'm assuming obviously you're not vaccinated, right?
No, I did not. But most of my family and loved ones did. So I was telling them not to because I knew 3 things, right? That it was an experimental vaccine, never been tested on humans. I knew that because of my background on Wall Street. I knew that Moderna was a sketchy company before they got the contract to do this. I knew that most vaccines take 7 to 10 years. To get safety data before they're approved. And I also intuitively knew that Operation Warp Speed sounded like an absolute disaster to me. Anything Warp Speed sounds like safety protocols cut, manufacturing processes rushed. It just sounded like, so I said to myself internally, I'm going to wait. And then, to my dismay, I didn't realize the propaganda campaign that was going to be implemented upon the populations of the globe. So when I saw everyone around me rushing to get this thing, I was horrified. I was like, it hasn't been tested. So for the employed, their disability rate went up 31%. The general U.S. population's disability rate went up 9%. then not in labor force, those who quit or got fired, who could have been in the labor force, their disability rate went up 4%. So whatever's going on, I think it's the vaccine. Something is happening to the employed people of our country. They're dying excessively, and they're getting disabled faster. So when I went before Senator Johnson in December, I said we have a national security issue here. And if you don't believe me, it's the vaccine, then what is it? Why aren't we talking about it? Because the employed of our country are dying faster than everybody else and getting disabled faster. That we're under. One stat I'd love to share with the audiences, between March of 21 and Feb of 22, when we first started doing this, 60,000 millennials excessively died. In the Vietnam War, 58,000 soldiers died over 12 years. So in 1 year, 60,000 millennials disappeared. One was due to the Viet Cong, and the other was due to a needle, I think. Lockdown. So there's a smoking gun in the UK data that we found where once the vaccines were introduced, all age groups except 1 through 14 started having excess deaths. 1 through 14 age group, their vaccines were introduced later around November of 2021. Excess mortality for that age group was coming down during the lockdowns because the largest single cause of death in that age cohort is accidental. So less activity. So their excess mortality was coming down. And even when the lockdowns came off in the spring in the UK, their excess mortality kept coming down. Then in November of 2021, it started going back up for age group 1 through 14. That's when the vaccine was introduced in the UK. It's no longer, I think, being offered for kids in it. I think they just suspended boosters for under 50 as well in the UK, or they're no longer promoting it. I did some back of the envelope math in 2021. You have to go back to when we were at the fever pitch of terror and fear. If you remember correctly, they were talking about quarterly boosters ad infinitum forever with vaccine passports, and you have to get your papers checked. This was back in 21. So I did some back of the envelope math. If that had occurred and this had been carried out, and Pfizer got half of the global share of the vaccine, and I assumed 5 billion people would be vaccinated, 2 billion would either not or abstain, and I looked at what they were charging for the vaccine, quarterly boosters, that would have gotten them about 390 billion in revenues. That was where they wanted to take this, and that'd be bigger than Apple's revenue streams. Here's a statistic that everyone needs to know. So it took decades and decades for Pfizer to get to 40 billion in revenues before COVID. After COVID, in 1 year, 90 billion.
How much of this with COVID vaccine? People who got the vaccination, it's like, no, join my camp because God forbid if I'm wrong for having taken a vaccine purely by fear. How much of it is people just want to defend their decision that they made the right decision and they don't want to be proven that they were wrong?
Oh, it's huge. I saw this on Wall Street all the time. My ethics professor said something that stuck in my head from business school. He said, you can't rationalize facts to someone whose position is based on emotion. So a lot of people took this out of fear, which is an emotion, and then they convinced others to join them on the ride. And now that is coming out that they may have been wrong. And ego is a big part of what I saw on Wall Street. I saw people ride stocks down to zero, but news flow was coming out that it was bad, and they keep buying all the way down because they couldn't admit they're wrong. So this phenomenon is now being repeated on a national, global scale with this vaccine. People just don't want to admit they're wrong. And it's the problem is this isn't money. This is like potentially your health. So I view the vaccine now as a trade, right? You're either long the vaccine or short the vaccine. If you're long it, you continue to get boosters, because if you took it and now you're hesitant, that's great. Don't take it. But if you continue to get boosters, it's like buying a stock on its way to zero. And if you didn't take the vaccine, you're on, I think, the right side of the trade. So it's a trade in my mind. And what was the original thesis of the trade? It prevented you from getting COVID and transmitting. We both know those are lies. So the thesis is unwinding as we roll through time. So people who keep defending this are now defending it based upon what I call a marketing scheme from Pfizer and Moderna, which says it reduces your chance of being seriously hospitalized. There's no paper on that. There's no data. So VAERS normally would have sent us in February of 2021. The frontline doctors said that this product should have been pulled because we had a death signal from VAERS, but it's been ignored. VAERS is the vaccine injury database. And in 1976 when we had the swine flu, they pulled that after 25 deaths, and VAERS is over 17,000 now. So this is the most bizarro thing I've ever seen in my life. The fact that this is continuing. I mean, the mere fact I'm on the scene here is a problem. Why is a guy from Wall Street having to do this? This should have ended in the early days of the vaccination.
Can you repeat what you just said about swine flu? You went really quick over that. I want to make sure people hear what you just said.
So in 1976, there was a swine flu vaccine that was created, and there was a big push by the president, a lot of celebrities. Sounds similar. 25 deaths, and they pulled it.
Pulled the vaccine off market.
Ended the program. So apparently life's gotten a lot cheaper in the last 40 years. And again, if you talk to some of the doctors that have been censored and maligned and smeared, they will tell you there was a safety signal in VAERS, and if everything was operating properly like it was in the 70s, this would have ended in March of 2021. They would have pulled the damn thing. But here we are today. You got me. The fact that I'm on the scene is sad because there's enough ones and zeros that I can count them. And I shouldn't be here. I should not be a public figure. I should be on Maui on the beach relaxing. And here I am because no one else seems to do it.